The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Guidry, and I'd like to welcome you to the Dibble Institute's second Wednesday webinar. Today's webinar is called Chambers of Heart, Building and Maintaining Trust and Relationships with Judge JH Corpening. We also have Kay Reed, Dibble's Executive Director, with us. Hi, Kay.
Hi, Kathy. Great to be here.
Thank you. Can you turn to the next slide, please? Before we begin, I would like to point out a few housekeeping tips. If you experience audio difficulties during this broadcast, please note the phone number listed here or on the link in your email connecting you to the webinar. You can both listen on the phone while viewing the broadcast on your computer. We invite your participation today, and that can be done in a couple of ways. One way is to ask questions in the question box that you see in your control panel. We will have a 10-minute Q&A at the end of the webinar. If you have questions regarding any content that you hear during the webinar, please jot down those questions. And then when we get to the question period during the end of the webinar, please write those questions in the question box. That way they won't get confused with the technical questions that might be asked. We also are going to be asking a poll question. You will use your mouse to answer it directly on your screen when the poll question pops up. We also are recording the webinar, and it will be available at the link that you see on your screen in about 3 business days, I would say by Tuesday morning. You can turn to the next slide. Before I introduce Judge Corpening, I would like to tell you a little bit about the Dibble Institute. These are our founders, Charlie and Helen Dibble. Charlie was an aeronautical engineer by trade, and like most engineers, he liked solutions. Some 30 years ago, he saw how young people's lives and relationships were being affected by those of their parents, and not all in a positive way. So he began by asking lead experts in the field of relationship education, what are you doing to convey to young people the need for creating stable families? Charlie didn't get the answers he was looking for, and he decided it was necessary to take research and supply materials to young people that would enhance their romantic relationships. So here the Dibble Institute is, more than 30 years later, helping young people have access to relationship education materials. Dibble is a national, independent, nonprofit, research-based organization. With you as our partners, we have reached more than 1.5 million young people in the last 10 years. Let's talk a little bit about the core values of the Dibble Institute. First and foremost, we believe in research, and we go where the research leads. It's important to Dibble that we keep our materials up to date with the most current research. Next slide, please. Secondly, we believe in stable, healthy families. Although we know there are trends, we follow the research. Research shows that children do best when raised by their own 2 parents. Research also shows that children do best when parents are together. We do understand that not all families have 2 parents. There are many single parents who do great jobs and have great outcomes with their children, but we do know how difficult single parenting can be. We also do believe that high conflict, abusive situations are not good for children, and those relationships are better being apart. Next slide. Finally, the Dibble Institute believes that all people deserve to be treated with respect. All relationships get better, stronger, and healthier with relationship education. Our materials are suitable for all kinds of relationships. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to release a poll question. I want to know how many of you work directly with teens or young adults in your daily jobs. If you can use your mouse and answer yes or no for me, that will help us know how many of you on a daily basis work with them. Okay, it looks like 76% of you do, and then 24% probably work with youth at some point, or maybe your organization does. That's great. Okay, so now let's meet Judge JH Corpening. First, I'm going to tell you a little story. Judge Corpening doesn't even know I'm going to tell you this, but I think this tells a little bit about why Judge Corpening can talk with us about heart. When my almost 30-year-old daughter was in kindergarten, I would sometimes drop her off at school instead of her riding the school bus. After a few times of noticing this man in a suit, with a smile on his face always, opening the car doors early in the morning for the riders and speaking to the children and parents, I began to be very curious. It wasn't just one time I saw this man, but multiple times. Who was this man who got up so early with his suit on to open the car doors? Why was he the only man among the moms? I asked around and you guessed it. This man was Judge Corpening. This automatically told me a little bit about the heart of Judge Corpening. I continually made note of when I saw him around the community and when others made mention of him. Judge Corpening has been a fixture in the schools in New Hanover County, North Carolina for many years. So let's go to the official bio of Judge Corpening. And I had to shorten it quite a bit. I'll have to put it on the website when I post the webinar recording. Judge Corpening has served as one of the full-time judges in family court in New Hanover County, North Carolina since 2000. In December 2014, he transitioned to juvenile court full-time, hearing all delinquency, abuse, neglect, dependency, and termination of parental right issues in New Hanover County. Judge Corpening currently chairs many local and state committees, and as part of his work with the Chief Justice, Judge Corpening is responsible for planning training for the entire North Carolina Judicial branch on the opioid crisis. Judge Corpening has formed several school justice partnerships designed to improve outcomes for youth in school and in court. Most recently, he facilitated the development of an interagency governance agreement on the handling of school offenses to address issues related to the school-to-prison pipeline in New Hanover County. The agreement was signed on November 2nd, 2015, and is being implemented system-wide. This agreement is a model for part of the Raise the Age legislation, which became law in North Carolina this year and will result in statewide application of this model. Judge Corpening is currently working with judicial districts across North Carolina to develop their own agreements to keep kids in school, out of court, and off the street. Judge Corpening has received many accolades throughout his service as an attorney and judge. Just to name a couple, in 2018, he was recognized by the National Court-appointed Special Advocates Guardian Ad Litem Association as Judge of the Year at their national conference in Boston. He was also recognized in 2018 by the North Carolina Attorney General with a Dogwood Award for his work in pretrial release reform. And with that, I'd like to welcome the Honorable JH Corpening.
Thanks, Kathy and Kay. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. Kay, if you can go ahead and advance the next slide. So we're going to spend about 40 minutes talking about a new kind of heart today. And what I'm going to do is work with you to help you understand why heart is the key to trust and relationships, to both building and maintaining trust and relationships. I'm going to help you see what those 5 chambers of heart are. Help you see a new approach to building relationships, building and maintaining relationships and trust with the young people that we work with, and then empower you to be a new kind of leader in the lives of the young people you do work with. Next slide, please. Okay. So as part of this, we're going to watch some movies today. The session is built around leadership development of a young quarterback named Shane Falco in the movie The Replacement. So we're going to have some fun, watch a few football video clips out of the movie The Replacements. The first video clip actually takes place near the end of the replacement season. Pro football had gone on strike. The owners had hired replacement players to try to finish the season, and the Washington Sentinels were poised to make the playoffs for the first time in years, even with the replacement players. And all-pro quarterback Martell showed back up across the picket line to play. First half was something of a disaster. We're going to pick up with Eddie Martell and Coach Jimmy McGinty right at the end of the first half in the final game of the season. So, Kay, can you roll that clip? All right, so what Coach McGinney had there in the first half of the game against Dallas was a spoiled all-pro quarterback who was not a leader for his team. Responded to the coach, that's not the way I play, blew off the coach, threw the ball away at the end of that pivotal first half, didn't have any concern. What did Coach McGinty need? He answered that question during the interview. He needed a leader with heart. And leading is all about building and maintaining trust and relationships. And so we're going to look at the development of Shane Falco's 5 chambers of heart and how he helped lead the Washington Sentinels to the playoffs for the first time in years. It's important to think about what I call the 9/10 rule. We actually spend about 9/10 of our time working on building and maintaining trust and relationships with the folks we work with, whether it's our work team or the young people we work with. It's too late if we wait until the game's on the line or decisions have to be made to start trying to build those relationships. We have to work all the way through to build and maintain those trust and relationships. Our focus is often on the 1/10. We've got to focus on the 9/10. So let's look at the 5 chambers of heart. So if you're ready, let's break, move to the next slide. We'll start with honesty. The first step in the first chamber of heart is honesty, and it's honesty with those we lead and ourselves. And both pieces of this are important because as we're working, especially with teenagers or young adults, they're very perceptive. And if we're not honest with both ourselves and with them, if we don't say what we mean and mean what we say, if we're all the time talking about me, mine, then our relationships with those young people will not ever foster, they will fester. And that's important. Next slide, Kay. So we're going to pick up with Shane Falco on the issue of honesty, and without any other introduction, let's just roll that second replacements clip. So we see a glimpse of Falco's honesty there. This is halftime of that Dallas game that we started with. We saw Eddie Martell's attitude both at the end of the first half when he threw the ball away, engaged with Coach McGinney, and then we see his attitude in the locker room. Falco was watching on TV on his houseboat when he saw McGinney said he needed heart. Falco comes back. You see what he said when Martell said, "You'll never be anything but a replacement player." And Falco looks at his teammates and says, yeah, I can live with that. Honest with himself, honest with his teammates. The impact of honesty on our students, just like with Shane Falco and his team. If we're honest with ourselves and with them, then honesty is absolutely an important building block of heart. Let's move to the next slide. Respect is the second chamber of heart. Respect is critical in working with our young people or young adults. The interesting thing about respect is that respect of others must first be earned. And the easiest way to do that is to first offer it, then receive it. And one of the interesting things that I experience in my work life is I walk in a room and a deputy sheriff says, all rise, everybody stands up, he opens court. But just because they get up when I walk in the room and the deputy says, all rise, doesn't mean that they respect me. They may respect the office of judge, but they don't necessarily respect me. So it's important for me to offer respect to everyone that I interact with, regardless of whether they're 6 years old or 70 years old, whether they are charged with a crime or whether they are there as a witness, doesn't matter. It's important for me to offer respect. And as we work with young people, It's important for us to offer respect to them too, to let them know that we do respect them and that we are concerned about them. And we all have the ability to do this. It's not complicated to offer respect. All we have to do is do it, but it's got to be intentional. How do we communicate respect? You know, our tone of voice can communicate respect. The words we choose can communicate respect. The time we spend with young people can communicate respect. The interest we show and some of the other chambers of heart that we'll talk about all help with communicating respect, but we have to be intentional. Barriers do exist to this sometimes. Sometimes it's a matter of perspective, both ours and theirs, the young people we're working with. Sometimes those barriers are as simple as language or music or clothing. But as we look at barriers, if you think about barriers that we as adults perceive in our dealing with young people, and we wrote those barriers down, if we asked a group of teenagers what barriers they see in working with us, the same words will be on the list, but it's a matter of different perspective. Let's move to the next slide, Kay. So it's important for us to recognize these barriers and then work to remove the barriers. Some of that may mean, just for example, my experience working my 17-year-old who just got his driver's license, and as we were going through driver's ed, there was music that he wanted to listen to that was calming. Now, I'm not clear why that music was calming, because it certainly didn't calm me, but it calmed him, and I was able to recognize that and deal with that. We have to recognize these barriers and then remove the barriers so that trust and relationships can develop. And as we work to remove these barriers and offer respect to young people, we're setting the example for others to follow our lead. And it's important for us as concerned adults in the lives of children to set the example so that other adults will follow our lead. Next slide. So let's pick back up with Shane Falco on the issue of respect. And without any other introduction on the issue of respect, Kay, roll it. So this is the second time that the pros who were on strike turned over Falco's truck. The first time was the first day that Shane showed up for practice with the replacement team. Pulled up in the parking lot. He's by himself. He was greeted by the same group of the pros. They turned over his car. He left it sitting in the parking lot. He had to get a ride home after practice. There was nobody there for him. So what was the difference? The difference was that over time, as the season started and then began to progress, Shane showed respect to the rest of his team, and he earned respect from the rest of his team. So this time, when the pros turned over his truck, the guards showed up appropriately with a mission to protect their quarterback. He had offered respect. He was given respect. Respect is a building block of heart. Next slide. So interest is the next chamber of heart. And this requires genuine interest on our part with young people. And I'll go back to the barriers for just a minute, because sometimes that's a little challenging for us to genuinely be interested in things that they're interested in, but we've got to find a way. One of the simplest ways of actually showing interest is to listen. The question that I've heard over the years as I've watched teenagers interact with adults is the teenager asking the question, "Are you listening to me?" And it's apparent to me as an observer that the adult is not listening. The perception is that we don't listen, that we won't listen, and the result is no connection. We've got to show interest. Next slide. So the first step is to listen to our students or the young people that we're working with. Taking into account the barriers, we've got to listen. We've got to find a way to show genuine interest. One of the ways after we listen to them is to pay attention to the things that they're interested in and find a way to spend both quality and quantity time with young people. Quality time is motivated by your sincere interest in the young people that you're serving in a leadership role with. That you're actually interested in what they're doing, that you spend time that is meaningful to them, that is meaningful to you. That quality time is important. And then quantity time demonstrates your commitment to them over time. And we're gonna talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But one of the examples that I can give you is that when I was active as a youth in Boy Scouts of America, I was also a high school athlete and a three-sport athlete. Basketball was my primary sport. So I was pulled and tugged between being committed to Boy Scouts and my basketball world. My scoutmaster came to virtually every home basketball game that I played my sophomore, junior, and senior year in high school. Almost every one. He didn't try to compete for my time. He supported my interest. He demonstrated that over time he was absolutely committed to me pursuing that, and then supported me in pursuing my Boy Scout work as well. All of us need to find ways to spend first that quality time with young people, but then also to spend time with them over periods of time that demonstrate commitment. One of the things that I've talked with educators about in our high schools in particular here in Wilmington is that, you know, as a high school teacher, you may only have a student for one semester, but you'll see that student in the hall, even though they may not be your student in the semester, you can still speak and ask them, "How's the semester? What are you taking? How are you doing?" and mean it. And that has an impact on young people when you check back in with them, when you show you remember, when you show that you're still interested, and that commitment over time is important. One of the things that has been meaningful to me over time is that Kathy did tell a story about me opening car doors. I just finished year 24 of either directing traffic or opening car doors at one school or another in New Hanover County, and I'll be back for year 25 next year. So there have been a couple of generations of kids that I've gone through school with every day of their school life, even if it's just for 30 or 45 minutes in the morning, seeing them speaking, saying good morning. I see those young people as young adults in our community now. They recognize me, they speak to me, they know that I have been there for them over time. It's not complicated for me to spend 30 or 45 minutes at school in the morning, but it has made a big difference over the years in the lives of those students, and they recognize my commitment to them over time. Each of us can find a way. It doesn't have to be at that level, but for us to find a way to demonstrate our interest is important. Next slide. So think about, just for a second, you know, some of these questions are obviously rhetorical questions, but how will a teenager, or anyone else for that matter, respond to a lack of interest? I think we all know that teenagers are very perceptive and they will not respond well if they sense that we are not interested in them in terms of what they have to say or what they're doing. So we've talked a little bit about how we can show interest, and I think it's a challenge for each of us as we work with individual students to find ways to connect with each one of them, or if they're not students, but individual young people, to identify what they do and find a way to heighten the importance of what they do and to give priority to them and to give recognition to them. So it's important for us to, on a case-by-case basis, find a way to show our interest in them as a person and in what they're doing. Falco hung out with his team. He showed genuine interest in individual players in terms of their needs. He took up for his team. He placed team before self. There's a scene in the movie where he actually took a beating for his team in order to take up for one of his teammates who was born deaf but was still able to play football. The pros showed up and made fun of him, and Falco started the fight to take up for him, took a beating. They landed in jail, but they came together as a team in recognition of Shane's interest in all of the players. What happens when we put self first? We talk about me and mine a few slides ago. Toby Keith wrote a song about that. When we put self first, kids recognize that. And we're not going to be leaders with heart if we put self first. We've got to be interested in these kids. So interest is a building block of heart. Let's go to the next slide, please. Commitment is the next chamber of heart. So how would we define commitment? Commitment's not defined by a moment. We know that commitment with our students or young people we're working with must endure over time. Our students must be able to see that. We know that commitment both inspires and attracts people. We know that when a leader is committed, that followers buy into the leader and then the leader's vision, both of which are important. They've got to be willing to follow, and then, because of the commitment of the leader, be willing to follow the leader's vision. And that's what we want as leaders in the lives of young people, is to, as we seek to shape their lives, not because we're telling them what to do, but because we're encouraging them to want to do it themselves, as we get them to buy into our vision in their life or our vision for their next steps in their life. Commitment is a critical part of that. Next slide, please. So one of the best definitions of commitment is this quote that I've shown from George W. Bush. I think it was September 12, 2001 at Ground Zero. It may have been the 13th, but I think it was the 12th. We will not waver. We will not tire. We will not falter, and we will not fail. I remember that like it was yesterday. My 17-year-old was born on September 12, 2001. He actually was, his mom was transported to a hospital out of town in some pretty serious health issues while she was in labor. She couldn't fly because everything was grounded and had to ride in an ambulance that day. We all remember why commitment was important at that time in our nation's life. So you may think, okay, well, that's, our nation was under attack. Why is that commitment connected to the kind of commitment that we need to show in terms of dealing with our students or the young people that we work with? It's because the future is at stake. And the level of commitment that we show to our young people as we seek to be leaders in their lives can be life-changing. And as we seek to change lives for the better, when we're successful in improving their status in life and improving their goals, improving their educational outcomes, improving their life outcomes, then we can have a generational impact on those young people and their future families. So the future is literally at stake as we're working with young people. So I don't think it's unfair to make a comparison between the level of commitment that George W. Bush asked for and the kind of commitment that we need to have for our young people. Let's move to the next slide, please. So commitment does start in your heart. And this isn't the five-chamber heart that I'm talking about, but your heart of hearts. And commitment is tested by action and time. There's nothing easy about commitment. I can tell you that the commitment that I've had to students in directing traffic and opening car doors, I've been out there in the driving rain, thunder and lightning. I've been out there in 8 degrees, freezing cold. I've been out there in 88 degrees, burning up and going home and taking a second shower. Commitment isn't easy and will be tested. And young people, by their nature, test us. But commitment opens the door to achievement. It opens the door to achievement, both your achievement and your students' achievement or the young people that you're working with. John Maxwell, who has written multiple books on leadership, talks about commitment and describes 4 kinds of people and their level of commitment. And he starts with cop-outs who have no goals. They don't commit. He talks about holdouts who don't know about whether they have goals or not. They're afraid to commit. Dropouts who start down the path of commitment but then quit. And then all-outs. The all-outs set goals. They commit. They pay the price to reach those goals. Leadership does require sacrifice. So the question for you today is, where do you fall in that spectrum that John Maxwell describes? I hope that you're all outs. I hope that you're willing to do that because commitment is so very, very important in what we do. Let's move to the next slide, please. And so we're going to pick back up with Shane Falco in the locker room again. If you'll roll it, please, Kay. So why did the quarterback with no contract show back up at halftime? And this clip is another part of what we saw earlier. Why did he show up at halftime after he had seen Coach McGinney say what he needed was heart? He showed up because he was committed to his teammates. He was committed to his teammates, and he heard what McGinney said loud and clear, and he showed back up at halftime. We saw in the earlier clip how the team responded to both Martell and Falco. We see in this clip how Coach McGinney responded to him. What took you so long? He knew he had sent a message to Falco. He knew that Falco would be watching the game. It was that commitment. So what happens to our relationships when we demonstrate commitment? Think about other relationships outside of our relationships with students or young people we work with. Think of your relationship with your spouse or significant other. What happens in those relationships when we demonstrate commitment over time? They grow and flourish. What happens to trust when we demonstrate commitment in relationships other than relationships with our students or young people we're working with? Trust flourishes when we demonstrate commitment. So if those guys, think about it in your workplace. What happens to your work relationships when you demonstrate commitment on your job? Or what happens to trust when you demonstrate commitment in the workplace? Relationships and trust flourish. It works with our young people too, and we've got to pay attention to commitment as we work with our young people and make sure that we're demonstrating commitment to them over time. It is every bit as important as the words of George W. Bush because we are talking about their future. Commitment is absolutely a building block of heart. Next slide, Kay. Passion is the last chamber of heart that we're going to identify today. Passion may be the most important that we talk about. Back to John Maxwell for just a minute. This quote, when a leader reaches out in passion, he is usually met with an answering passion, comes from Maxwell's 21 indispensable qualities of a leader. I'd recommend that you take a look at Maxwell books, also Simon Sinek books on leadership, finding your why. Passion is absolutely critical. So take your temperature today. Where are you in your professional role on the passion thermometer? I think it's important for us to think about that because we also need to take our temperature in our personal lives, in our relationships, in our workplace, in terms of our passion level with our job. But why are you here today? I hope you're here today because you're passionate about building better relationships with the young people you work with. So are you excited about each day? Are you excited about going to work each day? One of the thrills that I have now after almost 28 years on the bench is that I look forward to coming to work each day. Even though there are some cases that I deal with that are about a side of life that's horrific, but I'm excited to be here because I've got an opportunity to make a difference. I'm excited about trying to share that passion and motivate people and encourage people that I interact with every day. How about you? Are you excited about each day? Are you excited about working with the young people that you work with? It will show if you're passionate about it. It will also show if you're not. So you must care passionately, both about those you lead, which are your students or the young people that you're working with, but also about the organization, your school, or whatever organization that you're connected with. It's also important to be passionate about that as well. Next slide. So that's got to be a fire. It's got to be a fire in you that can start a fire in others. But in order for a fire to start in others, they've got to be able to see that fire that's in you. One of my favorite philosophers is Batman. Bet you never thought of Batman in the context of being a philosopher before hearing that today. But Batman says, it's not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you. The fire of your passion has to light the way. Others must see it. It doesn't matter how brightly it burns underneath, but unless others can see it, unless you're lighting the way for others, then you're not going to be successful in sharing that passion with others and motivating others. One of the biggest challenges we face in working with young people is motivation. Motivation starts with our passion and with our ability to share our passion with others. Next slide. So back to Maxwell for just a minute. Maxwell shares 4 truths about passion. Maxwell says that the first step to achieve passion is the first step to achievement, both yours and your students. He says that passion increases your willpower first, and then that of your students. He says that passion changes you and then changes your followers. He says that passion makes the impossible possible. You see how that works? As we share our passion for our work with our young people, whether they're students or young adults, then as we first develop our passion for what we're doing, it's contagious. Achievement, willpower, changes happen. Impossible becomes possible because of our passion and because we're willing to share that passion and motivate those we're working with. And passion was one of the big differences between Martel and Falco. Martel was at a point in his career where he was concerned about his Porsche automobile and his paycheck, wasn't concerned about the team. He was concerned about a contract. He wasn't concerned about relationships. Falco, on the other hand, wasn't concerned about a contract, didn't have one. He knew that game with Dallas was probably going to be his last one. He showed up anyway. He showed up because he cared about his team. He had built the four chambers of heart. Passion is absolutely the key to heart. So that's 5 chambers. Let's move to the next slide. So where we started with this, and I didn't play a clip from the very start of the season, but in the first game of the replacement season, the team made ESPN highlights for like worst plays of an entire season. The first set of downs, I think they were penalized 40 or 50 yards. They couldn't get a playoff. There were all kinds of things that happened. They had a quarterback, but they were missing a leader. They didn't have a leader with heart at the start of the season. So that brings us to the final replacements clip. And so this is last game of the season. Kay, if you'll roll it. So several pieces of that clip that need some explanation. They're kicking a field goal, could have won the game with the field goal. Nigel Gruff, the placeholder, though, was being blackmailed by some folks that he owed money to. Falco picked up on that and was willing to take a chance to protect his player, to keep the game from being thrown. Actually went for a touchdown that was called back because of a penalty. But Falco wanted the ball. McGinty, of course, said, I'll need an explanation at some point for what just happened. What do we do now? Falco says, I want the ball. He was a leader. He had developed heart. He was prepared. We transition into the huddle scene where the team is supportive of one another, even though Jumbo had committed a penalty. The team was supportive of one another. And then Falco says, okay, besides me, who wants the ball? And the deaf player that he had taken up for in a bar fight one night signs that he wants the ball. The difference between the first game where Falco called an audible and basically lost the game and the last game that we just saw the clip from was heart. And it was all about honesty with his players from the first time that he met them all the way through that last game. It was about respect that Falco offered to his teammates and then the respect that he earned in return. It's about the interest that he had shown in his players, both personally and professionally. It was about the commitment that Falco had demonstrated over time for his players. And then, yes, it was about the passion that Shane Falco brought to the game, and you could see a touch of that in that last clip. Those are the things that were different between the first game, which was a disaster, and the last game. Next slide, Kay. So Falco, over the course of this replacement season, did build relationships with his team and acquired the trust of his team. The clip did end right before the game is over. I always want to play like the last 2 more minutes of it just to see the touchdown where they actually win the game and beat Dallas and go to the playoffs for the first time in their franchise history. Unfortunately, the pros all crossed and the replacement players were released, but the Dallas game was the pinnacle of their career. Falco, the leader, understood his role. He had developed in his role as a leader with heart. He brought the tools that he needed to bring to bear to enable his team to win. The leadership tools that we have at our disposal that we can bring in working with the young people that we work with. His heart, his 5 chambers of heart, empowered others to want the ball, to take control, to lead. Isn't that what we want from the young people that we work with? Don't we want to inspire them as they grow into teenagers and are transitioning from high school into adult life, whether college or employment, whatever the transition is? Don't we want to empower them to want the ball, to take control, and to lead? Isn't that our mission? These 5 chambers of heart can do that for our students and those we work with. Next slide. So to wrap up, heart is essential to building relationships. I hope that I've proven that to you today in sharing these 5 chambers of heart with you. Heart is essential to maintaining relationships with young people that we work with. We know that it's not enough to build relationships if we don't maintain relationships. We're talking about dealing with students over time. Heart is essential to trust. These 5 chambers of heart and the leadership skills that they bring to bear are essential to trust. We know that trust is the foundation of everything we do with young people. If there's no trust, then there's no relationship. And then we are not meeting our expectations either as part of our employment or in our role in working with students. Whatever our role is, if we don't have trust, if we don't build relationships, if we don't maintain relationships, then we're not getting our students to the point where they're ready to want the ball, where they're ready to take control, where they're ready to win the game. So I hope that through this last just about 40 minutes that you've had the ability to see that these 5 chambers of heart are important to you, and that you can recognize the importance of relationships and trust in your lives personally, but then also recognize the importance of these chambers of heart in building and maintaining relationships and trust with the young people that you work with. So to wrap it up, lead with heart. Lead with these 5 chambers of heart. Lead with these 5 chambers of heart every day in every way. We appreciate you listening with us today. And Kathy, I'm going to throw it back to you to handle the 10 minutes of question and answer that we've got. Thank you, everyone, for participating today.
Thank you so much, Judge Corpening. I'm going to give everyone a few minutes, excuse me, to write any questions that you might have in the question box for Judge Corpening. Judge Corpening, I appreciate this was such a great reminder for us to remember just how important the relationship is when we're working with young people. I know that all of the people out there that do direct services, it can be probably a very exhausting job some days, and they have to take time off from themselves, do some self-care, and then just get back right into it, remembering those 5 chambers of heart. and especially remembering why they got into doing the direct services and why they have the passion to begin with and why they need to continue with it. But we really appreciate your insight on all of this, and I appreciate the hard work that you do as well. I've got one question here for you. How can you focus on building commitment in your own life and relationships so you can lead with heart?
So I think that commitment is at the forefront of any relationship that we have, whether it's a relationship between friends, relationships between colleagues at work, whether it's a relationship with a significant other. So for me, I make a decision in developing that relationship that relationship is important. And if it's important, then I need to be committed to that relationship, whether it's some of my best friends that I have relationships with, some of my colleagues at work, whether it's the youth I used to advise in Boy Scouts, whether it's students that I interact with at school on a regular basis now. I think that it's a decision that I make that I'm all in, that I'm an all out, as John Maxwell talks about, because as we work with our students in particular, but also with other folks, we've got to make a decision to be all in, to say, I've got this, and then to be able to show people over time that we're all in and that we're supportive.
That's great. And Linda Costello wanted to say that she really enjoyed the presentation and that she loves working with youth, and it reminded her of all the things that she needed to stay connected to them. So that's great.
Awesome. Thanks, Linda.
And then Cheryl also wanted to thank you for the reminder of the why she's servicing the community and leading with service and leading with her heart. So that's really
so
good.
a connection that I can make real quick, especially the Simon Sinek materials that I mentioned. He does a great YouTube video about, it's called The Golden Circle, about always leading with why. Mm-hmm. And it's about helping you find your why as you work. And so as we're working with young people, if we can dial in on what motivates us, what our why is, and always lead with that, put that together with these 5 chambers of heart, then we're gonna connect.
Okay, Beatrice has a good question here, and you were a good one to answer this one. What should leaders of leaders do when we think we see people on our volunteer base lacking heart? They're doing a lot, but we still can see a lack of patience or a lack of passion.
So I think a couple of things. First, I mentioned setting the example, and we always hope as leaders that as we set the example, there are those who are paying attention. That doesn't always work out that way, but one of the other things that we can do is to actually do motivational training for the folks that either work in our organization or volunteer in our organization, to reconnect them so that they're purpose driven. I think that's important. The first time that I actually pulled together this presentation was as part of a national training for the Order of the Arrow, which is part of Boy Scouts of America. And it was designed to help rekindle the leadership motivation of advisors who were working with youth, because we had seen the same kind of issue that the question raises, that there were volunteers who just didn't seem to connect on the motivational piece that they needed to have in working with youth. And so we built this training session to help remind them. And so sometimes some simple training session, some connection to resource, just to reconnect, because if they're volunteering, they had the passion to begin with. And so sometimes it's a general reminder that we need to find for them. And so maybe a training opportunity with something like this or some other training resource could be useful in helping remind them of why they started doing that volunteer work to begin with, and then reconnect with the youth.
Mm-hmm. And my suggestion might be, if you try that enough times and you still don't see that connection with, say, the youth, that you give them another job that maybe where they're not working directly with the youth, but they're volunteering in another way. Sure,
because there's a lot at stake, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
I mean, because I mean, there's a lot at stake as we're working with young people, because especially if we're connected with them, then we're helping shape their future, and that's it's a weighty responsibility. And so certainly, as we have folks on our team who are interacting with young people, we want them to be on their best game.
Exactly. Okay, Terrence has, in his experience, passion and commitment help fuel each other, and there are times when I continue out of commitment, even when I don't feel passionate to continue the work. Is this a natural cycle, or are there ways to keep passion up over the long haul?
So I'm terrible about self-care. I've been limping around for 2 years with people telling me, go take care of your hip, go take care of your hip. And I'm saying, I'll take care of it. I'll get to it. For 2 years, I've been limping around, and I had knee replacement surgery about 15 days ago, hip replacement surgery about 15 days ago. I just wouldn't take care of myself, even though I'm doing all these other things. Sometimes we wax and wane, but if we seize moments, and what I always try to do is seize moments, whether it's, sometimes for example, in my abuse, neglect, dependency court, when I've got teenagers who are in foster care who come to court and I have a chance to talk to them, if I can find a way through, for example, motivational interviewing, to get them to smile, to get them to engage with me, to get them to where I can see a light in their eyes, then that helps refuel my passion. Even though I may have been hearing horrible cases all day or all week, I may be, an all in terms of commitment, but that fire of passion seems to be, that light in the eyes of a young person has been a great rekindling source for me. Honestly, that's one of the reasons that I've done the car duty at school for years, because I'm generally dealing with young people who are excited about life, and I say good morning and they say good morning. And when I come to work every day, I've just spent 30 or 45 minutes with kids who are generally excited about life, and I'm just on go. It's like I stopped at a gas station on the way to work and refuel my passion meter. So each of us needs to find a way to do that. It's tough, especially if you're working primarily with youth that have some challenges. That can be tough. Find a way to fill up that passion tank. Find a way to have those smiles or the light in their eyes recharge you. I think we have to be intentional about that, but it's important for us to find a way to recharge. It's important for us personally to find a way to recharge. That's part of self-care. Mm-hmm. But then it's important for us to be able to deliver that passion and mean it.
Great. And Daniel, he had a similar question. I think Daniel, probably Judge Corpening's answered your question about youth workers in inner cities versus suburban. And I think the same thing about finding passion would answer that question as well, because youth workers have to find their passion no matter what kind of youth that you work with.
So I work with a lot of children. Most of the teenagers that I interact with in my abuse, neglect, dependency caseload who are in foster care have come out of poverty. Most of them have, and there's still a light that we can find. Is it more challenging than working in suburbia? Absolutely. Is it even more important than the work that happens in suburbia? Absolutely. Because one of the thrills for me is that we've seen a significant uptick in our kids aging out in foster care going to college, which is awesome. And part of that is we've changed the conversation we have, both social workers with kids and me with kids, about their future, and it works. So it's more challenging, but it's also more important.
Okay, great. Okay, Kay, if you'll turn the next slide, there will be a brief survey after you log out of this webinar. If you'll please answer those questions, it helps us. Again, our webinar will be available in 3 days on our website, and you're welcome to show it to anyone you'd like. Stay in touch with us. Sign up to subscribe to our newsletter on our website. Follow us on LinkedIn and like us on Facebook. Kay, would you like to share with us the next webinar? Or would you like me to go ahead? It's August 14th, 2019. It's called Learning About Positive Youth Development, a free and fun course for youth work professionals. So we look forward to seeing you next month as well. And next slide. We're excited to say that we're going to have a Mind Matters training September 5th and 6th live with the author of Mind Matters, which is a trauma-informed curriculum for the paraprofessional. It will be in Santa Ana, California. Please email me if you'd like details on that. There are CEUs available as well. But this is a great opportunity to hear about this curriculum from the author herself. She's great, and it's a great curriculum. Thank you again. Have a great day. And thank you again, Judge Corpening and Kay, for your help. Y'all have a nice day.